My name's Regina, and I became a single mom when my daughter, Mia, was just 10. My ex-husband, Tom, decided he'd found greener pastures with another woman. Just like that, he was gone, leaving me to pick up the pieces of our shattered family. From that day on, it was just the two of us. I threw myself into work, determined to give Mia everything she needed. I climbed the corporate ladder, worked overtime, took on extra projects, anything to make sure my little girl wouldn't want for anything. The trauma of abandonment hit Mia hard. She became withdrawn, angry. Her grades started slipping, and she'd lash out at the slightest provocation. I was at my wit's end, trying to be both mom and dad, provider and nurturer. Finally, I decided to take her to a psychologist. Dr. Sarah was kind and patient, but even she struggled with Mia's anger. "Your daughter's dealing with a lot of pain," she told me after one particularly difficult session. "It's going to take time, Regina. Be patient with her." Years passed, and things got better, or so I thought. Mia seemed to be healing, growing into a beautiful, intelligent young woman. But there was an undercurrent of resentment that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't until I started trying to date again that I realized the full extent of the damage Tom had done. Every time I'd meet someone new, someone who might actually be interested in me as more than just Mia's mom, she'd fly off the handle. The first time it happened, I was blindsided. I'd been seeing Mark for a few weeks, and things were going well. He was kind, funny, and he seemed to genuinely care about me. I thought it was time for him to meet Mia. "Honey," I said one morning over breakfast. "I've invited someone over for dinner tonight. His name's Mark, and I want the two most important people in my life to know each other." She stared at me, her eyes narrowing. "Is he your boyfriend or something?" I hesitated, not sure how to answer. "We'd been seeing each other, yes. But it's not serious yet. That's why I want you to meet him." "No," she said flatly. "I don't want to meet him. I don't want him in our house. Cancel the dinner." I was shocked. "Mia, sweetie, I know this might be difficult for you, but..." "Difficult?" she shouted, standing up so suddenly, her chair fell backward. "You think this is difficult? You want to abandon me like he did? To start a new family and forget all about me?" She stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my cold coffee and a sinking feeling in my stomach. I should have known then that this was just the beginning. Despite Mia's outburst, I decided to go ahead with the dinner. I thought maybe if she met Mark, she'd see he wasn't a threat. God, was I wrong? Mark arrived at 7, looking nervous but eager. I introduced him to Mia, who barely looked at him. "Nice to meet you, Mia," he said, extending his hand. "Your mom's told me a lot about you." Mia ignored his hand. "I bet she has," she muttered. The tension was thick as we sat down to eat. I tried to keep the conversation light, but Mia's one-word answers and glares made it difficult. Halfway through the meal, Mark made an innocent comment about how nice it was to have a home-cooked dinner. That's when Mia exploded. "Oh, I'm sure you'd love to have this all the time, wouldn't you?" she sneered. "Playing happy families with my mom?" "Mia," I warned, but she was just getting started. "What, Mom? Isn't that what this is? You trying to replace Dad? Trying to throw me away like he did?" "That's not what this is at all," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm just trying to..." "To what? To ruin everything?" Mia stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Well, guess what? I won't let you." Before I could react, she grabbed her plate and hurled it to the floor. The crash of breaking china was deafening in the sudden silence. "Mia," I gasped. "What are you doing?" But she wasn't listening. She grabbed another plate, then another, smashing them on the ground. Food and broken dishes were everywhere. "This is our home," she screamed. "Ours, not his." Mark stood up, looking shell-shocked. "I think I should go," he said quietly. After Mark left, Mia locked herself in her room. I spent the night cleaning up the mess, tears mixing with the soapy water as I scrubbed the floor. The next day, Mia acted like nothing had happened. But something had changed. From that day on, any attempt I made to date was met with hostility and tantrums. Years passed, and I found myself pushing away anyone who showed interest in me. It was easier than dealing with Mia's reactions. I told myself it was temporary, that once Mia was older, she'd understand. But deep down, I knew I was just making excuses. When Mia graduated high school, I was so proud. Despite everything, she'd done well in school and gotten into a good college. I thought maybe now, things would change. "Mom," she said the night before she left for college, you won't bring anyone home while I'm gone, will you?" I sighed. "Mia, honey, you're going to be living your own life now. Don't you think it's time for me to do the same?" Her face darkened. "So you are planning to replace me?" "Mia, please," I begged. "That's not fair. I've spent the last 8 years putting you first. I've given up everything for you." As soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. Mia's eyes filled with tears. "So I'm just a burden to you, is that it?" she cried. "A sacrifice you had to make?" "No, sweetie, that's not what I meant at all." I tried to backtrack, but it was too late. Mia stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. The next morning, she left for college without saying goodbye. With Mia away at college, I finally had a chance to rediscover myself. I started taking better care of myself, got a new haircut, bought some new clothes, even joined a gym. I reconnected with old friends, started going out more. And then I met David. He was kind, funny, and understood my situation with Mia. We started dating, and for a while, everything was perfect. But Mia, even from college, still tried to control my life. Every call, every visit home, she'd grill me about my social life. "Mom, you haven't let anyone into our house, have you?" she'd demand. I tried to reason with her. "Honey, you're living your own life now. Don't you think it's time I did the same?" But she'd get angry, threaten to drop out of college, say she couldn't focus on her studies, knowing I was replacing her. Once, after finding out about David, she called me in tears. "How could you do this to me? My grades are suffering because I'm so upset about you dating." It was exhausting, constantly walking on eggshells, trying to balance my happiness with Mia's demands. But I kept hoping things would get better once she graduated and started her own life. 4 years passed in this push and pull. Then, out of the blue, Mia called. "Mom, I'm coming home. And I'm bringing someone with me." My heart leapt. Maybe she'd finally found someone and understood why I'd wanted to date. Maybe now, things would change. When they arrived, I was shocked. Mia introduced the man beside her not as her boyfriend, but as her husband. "This is Jake," she said, a challenging look in her eyes. "We got married last week in Vegas." I couldn't believe it. My daughter was married, and I hadn't even known she was dating someone. "Mia," I gasped, "why didn't you tell me? Why wasn't I invited?" She shrugged. "We only met a few days ago. It was spontaneous." They didn't stay long. As they were leaving, I hugged Mia tightly. "I hope you'll be very happy," I whispered, trying to ignore the knot of worry in my stomach. For 6 months, I heard little from Mia. I tried to give them space, hoping they were settling into married life. Then, one rainy night, Mia showed up at my door, mascara streaking down her face. "He cheated on me," she sobbed. "I found him with another woman. We're getting divorced." Mia moved back in, quickly found a job, but showed no signs of looking for her own place. And I, remembering how she'd reacted to my attempts at independence, didn't push her. I was 46, Mia was 24, and we were settled into an uneasy coexistence when the doctor delivered the news that shattered our world. I had intestinal cancer. The diagnosis hit me like a freight train. Cancer. The word alone was terrifying. When I told Mia, she broke down in tears. "Mom," she sobbed, clinging to me, "I'll take care of you. I promise. We'll get through this together." In that moment, all our past conflicts seemed to melt away. I quit my job, thankful for the savings I'd squirreled away over the years. At least we wouldn't have to worry about money on top of everything else. The chemotherapy started, and with it came a host of new challenges. I was constantly exhausted, nauseous, and in pain. Mia took time off work to care for me, and at first, she was attentive and enthusiastic. But as the days wore on, the reality of my condition began to wear on her. The cancer had wreaked havoc on my digestive system. I struggled to use the bathroom, often needing help to clean myself afterward. It was humiliating, but I had no choice. After particularly rough chemo sessions, I'd be too weak to even make it to the toilet. I started noticing changes in Mia's behavior. The loving concern in her eyes was gradually replaced by something else, disgust. She'd wrinkle her nose when she came near me, complaining about the smell. "Mom, you stink," she'd say, not even trying to hide her revulsion. "Can't you do something about it?" I wanted to scream at her, to remind her that I was fighting for my life, that I couldn't control what the cancer and chemo were doing to my body. But I bit my tongue. She was trying, in her own way, and that had to be enough. One day, after a particularly difficult morning, Mia approached me with a determined look on her face. "Mom, I think I need to go back to work," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "We should hire a nurse to take care of you." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. "I understand. We'll look into getting a nurse." The clinic where I was receiving treatment assigned a nurse named Sarah to help me at home. She was a godsend, strong, capable, and unfailingly kind. She handled my hygiene needs efficiently and without a trace of disgust. "Don't you worry, Regina," she'd say cheerfully as she helped me clean up. "We'll have you feeling fresh as a daisy in no time." With Sarah's help, my quality of life improved dramatically. But Mia wasn't happy about the arrangement. "I don't like having a stranger in our house all the time," she complained. "It's invasive." I tried to explain that Sarah was necessary for my care, but Mia wouldn't listen. Then, one evening, she dropped a bombshell. "Mom, I've been thinking," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Maybe it would be better if you moved to a specialized care facility. I could look after the house, and you'd get round-the-clock care." I stared at her, shocked. "No, I'm not leaving my home. This is where I'm comfortable, and this is where I'm going to fight this cancer." Mia's face clouded over with anger and frustration. "Fine," she snapped. "Have it your way." As she stormed off, I felt a deep sadness settle over me. I was fighting for my life, but it felt like I was losing my daughter in the process. As the chemo treatments continued, my body waged war against itself. Each day brought new challenges, new indignities. But nothing prepared me for the day my hair started falling out in clumps. I was in the bathroom, running my fingers through my long, once beautiful hair, when a handful came away in my palm. I stared at it, numb with shock. Mia's shriek jolted me back to reality. "Mom, there's hair everywhere. I'm sick of cleaning it up." I looked at her, standing in the doorway, her face twisted in disgust and frustration. In that moment, I made a decision. "Sarah," I called weakly to my nurse. "Could you please cut my hair?" As Sarah carefully sheared away my locks, I caught sight of Mia in the mirror. Instead of offering support or comfort, she was laughing. "You look like an alien," she snickered. "Maybe you should get a wig." Her words cut deeper than any surgeon's scalpel. That night, after Sarah had gone home and Mia had retreated to her room, I cried silently into my pillow. Where had I gone wrong? How had my sweet little girl turned into this cruel stranger? Weeks passed, and I continued my battle against cancer. Every day was a struggle, but I was determined to fight. Then, one afternoon, Mia dropped another bombshell. "Mom, I'm having some friends over for my birthday next week," she announced casually. I blinked in surprise. "Here? Honey, I don't think that's a good idea." The noise. "I need rest." Mia's face hardened. "If you don't like it, you can go somewhere else for the night." Actually, that might be better. I won't have to be embarrassed by you in front of my friends or deal with the smell. Her words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been bedridden for days, barely able to move. But in that moment, fury gave me strength. I pushed myself up, fixing her with a glare that would have made my own mother proud. "This is my house," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "If you don't like living here with me, you're welcome to leave." Mia's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in anger. "You're so selfish," she screamed. "All you think about is yourself. You know what? It would be better for everyone if you just died already. Then you'd stop being such an inconvenience to everyone around you." The room fell silent. I stared at my daughter, unable to believe the words that had just come out of her mouth. In her eyes, I saw no trace of the little girl I'd raised, no hint of love or compassion. Just cold, hard anger. "Get out," I shouted, surprising even myself with the force in my voice. "Pack your things and get out of my house. Now." For a moment, Mia just stood there, shocked. Then, with a scream of frustration, she stormed off to her room. I could hear her throwing things into bags, slamming drawers. Minutes later, she stormed past me, bags in hand. "I hate you," she spat as she reached the door. "I wish Dad had taken me with him when he left." And then she was gone, the front door slamming behind her. She didn't even bother to close it properly. The open door mocked me, a glaring reminder of Mia's dramatic exit. I sat there, staring at it, feeling utterly drained. Finally, I reached for my phone with shaking hands and dialed my friend, Linda. "Linda," I croaked when she answered. "I need help. Can you come over?" Linda arrived in record time, concern etched on her face. She closed the door, then rushed to my side. "Regina, what happened?" The whole story poured out of me, Mia's cruelty, her harsh words, her abrupt departure. Linda listened, her face a mix of shock and anger. "Oh, Regina," she sighed when I finished. "You need to forget about that ungrateful girl and focus on yourself. You're fighting cancer, for God's sake." We talked for hours, tears flowing freely between us. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room, I came to a painful realization. "It's my fault," I whispered. "I raised her to be this way. I always put her needs first, ignored my own. I thought I was being a good mother, but I was just teaching her to be selfish. From now on, I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to think about myself for once." True to my word, I threw myself into my treatment with renewed vigor. Sarah, my nurse, was a godsend, helping me through the worst days with gentle care and unwavering support. 2 more rounds of chemotherapy followed. They were brutal, leaving me weak and nauseous, but I refused to give up. All the while, my phone remained silent. No calls, no texts from Mia. I tried to tell myself it was for the best, that I needed to focus on my health, but the silence hurt more than I cared to admit. Months passed. Then, during a routine checkup, my doctor smiled at me, really smiled, for the first time since my diagnosis. "The cancer's receding, Regina," he said. "You're not out of the woods yet, but this is very, very good news." I left the hospital that day feeling lighter than I had in months. The world seemed brighter somehow, full of possibilities I'd thought were lost to me forever. I was thin, almost gaunt, after months of illness. My clothes hung off me like sacks. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. I started taking short walks in the park near my house, feeling the sun on my face, the breeze in what remained of my hair. One afternoon, I stood in front of my closet, realizing none of my old clothes fit me anymore. Instead of feeling sad, I felt liberated. It was time for a change, inside and out. I spent a day sorting through my wardrobe, making piles to donate to a local homeless shelter. As I packed up bags of my old life, I felt like I was shedding more than just clothes. I was letting go of the old Regina, the one who'd let herself be walked all over, who'd put everyone else's needs before her own. Looking around my big, empty house, I realized it no longer fit the person I'd become. It was time for a change. With my savings providing a comfortable cushion, I made a bold decision: I wouldn't return to work. Instead, I'd downsize and focus on living. I contacted a realtor and put my house on the market. It sold quickly, and I found a small, cozy apartment that felt like it was made for me. It was perfect for one person, bright, manageable, and full of potential for a fresh start. I invested the remaining money from the house sale, feeling financially secure for the first time in years. Life was good, peaceful. I spent my days exploring my new neighborhood, trying new hobbies, and simply enjoying the act of being alive. Then, 3 months after I'd settled into my new life, I received an unexpected call. It was the realtor who'd handled the sale of my old house. "Mrs. Walker," he said, sounding uncomfortable, "the new owners of your old house are having some issues. They've asked for your contact information. Is it all right if I give them your number?" Curious and a little concerned, I agreed. Shortly after, my phone rang again. This time, it was the new owner, a Mr. Thompson. "Mrs. Walker," he began, his voice tense, "I'm sorry to bother you, but something strange happened today. A young woman tried to break into our house. She tried to use a key at first, then started trying to force the door open. When I confronted her, she became hysterical, screaming that this was her house, that she should inherit it after her mother's death." The blood drained from my face. Mia. It had to be Mia. She thought I was dead and had come to claim her inheritance. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Thompson," I said, my voice shaking. I think that might have been my daughter. We've been estranged. She must have assumed." "Your daughter?" He sounded shocked. "But she said you were dead." "I've been very ill, we haven't spoken in months," I explained, not wanting to go into details. "Mr. Thompson, could I ask a favor? If she comes back, would you call me?" He agreed, and we ended the call. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue with my new, peaceful life. But I knew I couldn't. This confrontation had been coming for a long time. It was time to face Mia, to finally say all the things I should have said years ago. The call came sooner than I expected. Just a day after my conversation with Mr. Thompson, my phone rang. "She's here," Mr. Thompson said, his voice tense. "And she's causing quite a scene." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I'm on my way." The drive to my old house felt surreal. As I pulled up, I could hear the shouting before I even got out of the car. Mia's voice, shrill and angry, carried across the yard. "This is my house," she was screaming at the Thompsons, who stood on the porch looking shocked and frightened. "Get out now." I stepped out of my car, and for a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Mia turned, her eyes landing on me. The look of shock on her face quickly morphed into one of fury. "You," she spat. "You're supposed to be dead." I felt a calm settle over me, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around us. "I'm sorry to disappoint you, Mia," I said, my voice steady. Mia's face contorted with rage. "What's going on? Why are these people in our house?" "It's not our house anymore, Mia," I explained. "I sold it." Her eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in anger. "You can't do that. It was supposed to be mine. I was supposed to inherit it when you died." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "I'm sorry I inconvenienced you by surviving." Mia's face turned red. "You don't understand. I have debts, I need money." I shook my head, acutely aware of the Thompsons and the small crowd of neighbors who had gathered to watch the spectacle. "I don't owe you anything, Mia. You abandoned me when I was fighting for my life. You wished me dead. Why should I help you now?" "Because you're my mother," she screamed. "You're supposed to take care of me." I felt a sadness wash over me, but I stood my ground. "No, Mia, not anymore. You're an adult. Your choices, your consequences." Mia's face twisted into an ugly sneer. "You know what? Dad was right to leave you. You're useless. It would have been better if you had died." Her words hung in the air, shocking even the onlookers into silence. But this time, they didn't cut me to the core. This time, I felt only pity for the angry, bitter woman my daughter had become. Without another word, I turned and walked back to my car. Before getting in, I addressed the Thompsons. "If she comes back or tries to break in again, call the police," I said, gesturing towards Mia. "She has no right to be here." As I drove away, I caught a last glimpse of Mia in my rearview mirror, her face a mask of shock and fury. But for the first time, her anger didn't touch me. I was free. In the months that followed, I embraced my new life fully. I took up painting, finding joy in splashing colors across canvas. My health continued to improve, and each day I felt stronger, more alive. Mia never called or tried to contact me again. Sometimes I felt a pang of sadness for the relationship we'd lost, but mostly I felt relief. I had spent so many years trying to fill the bottomless pit of her needs. Now, finally, I was living for myself.